The Galaxy Council chamber floated in the depths of space, a massive ring of crystal and metal that had witnessed thousands of years of diplomatic history. Today, 47 alien species gathered for what they believed would be a simple administrative matter. The chamber buzzed with the translated voices of delegates, each species confident in their ancient wisdom and superior experience. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood alone in the center of the circular floor. Around her, rising in elevated tiers like an ancient amphitheater, sat the representatives of the most powerful civilizations in the known galaxy. The Vraxians, tall and elegant with their flowing robes of living light. The Korthians, massive warriors whose exoskeletons gleamed like polished bronze. The crystalline Tessarics who communicated through patterns of refracted light. Dozens of other species, each with millennia of spacefaring history behind them. Sarah wore a simple blue uniform, the flag of Earth on her shoulder. She had been a diplomat for 15 years, but nothing in her training had prepared her for this moment. The message had come suddenly, a mandatory summons. No explanation, no warning, just an order to appear before the full council for an emergency session. The Vraxian matriarch rose from her seat, her form shimmering with authority. She was old, even by Vraxian standards, having served the council for over 3 centuries. Her voice carried the weight of absolute certainty as the translation devices rendered her words into every language simultaneously. We convene today to address a matter of galactic security, the matriarch began. The species known as humanity has, in the past 2 centuries, expanded into space at an alarming rate. They have established colonies in contested regions. They have ignored established territorial boundaries. They have demonstrated a concerning pattern of aggressive behavior. Sarah felt her stomach tighten. This was worse than she had imagined. She raised her hand to speak, but the matriarch continued without acknowledgement. Humanity is young. Their spacefaring age spans merely 200 years. They are children playing with technologies they barely understand. Their diplomatic methods are primitive. Their expansion is reckless. And most concerning, their history is filled with endless warfare against themselves. A Korthian war prime stood, his voice like grinding metal. We have reviewed Earth's historical records. In the past 10,000 years of their civilization, they have known peace for less than 800 years total. They are a violent species, unsuited for the responsibilities of independent expansion. Sarah's hands clenched into fists at her sides. She wanted to shout, to defend her species, but she forced herself to remain calm. Losing her temper now would only confirm their prejudices. The matriarch raised one elegant hand and a holographic document materialized in the center of the chamber. It rotated slowly, visible to all present. Therefore, the Galaxy Council has prepared Resolution 7 Alpha. This resolution declares humanity a subordinate species in need of guidance and supervision. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. Subordinate species. The term was rarely used, reserved for primitive civilizations that had barely achieved spaceflight. It meant the end of human sovereignty. The terms are as follows, the matriarch continued. Humanity will surrender administrative control of 40% of their colonial holdings to council oversight. All human military vessels will submit to immediate inspection and limitation. Earth's government will accept council advisors with veto power over major decisions. Humanity will be granted limited representation on this council, without voting rights, until such time as they demonstrate sufficient maturity. The chamber erupted in a chorus of agreement. Species after species voiced their support. Some expressed sympathy for humanity's situation, suggesting this was for their own good. Others were more blunt, calling humans dangerous and in need of firm control. Sarah waited for the noise to die down. When the matriarch finally acknowledged her, she spoke clearly and calmly. Ambassador Chen of Earth, you may now respond to the Council's resolution. Every eye in the chamber focused on the lone human. Sarah took a deep breath. She thought of Earth, 3 months away at maximum speed. She thought of the billions of humans living across dozens of worlds. She thought of her daughter, born on Mars, who had never even seen Earth. She thought of everything humanity had built, survived and overcome. The people of Earth, Sarah said, her voice steady, respectfully decline this resolution. Silence fell across the chamber. It was not the silence of consideration, but of shock. Several delegates began speaking at once, their voices rising in disbelief. The matriarch silenced them with a gesture. Her expression was not angry but rather disappointed, like a parent dealing with a stubborn child. Ambassador Chen, perhaps you do not understand the situation. This is not a negotiation. This is a declaration of galactic law. You do not have the option to decline. With respect, matriarch, we do, Sarah replied. Humanity is a sovereign species. We govern ourselves. We do not recognize the Council's authority to declare us subordinate, and we will not comply with this resolution. A Corthian delegate laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the chamber. You speak bravely for a species that can barely cross your own solar system in reasonable time. We have been traveling the stars for 5,000 years, the Vraxians for even longer. What makes you think you can stand against the combined might of the Galaxy Council? Sarah met his gaze without flinching. Because we must. Because freedom is not negotiable. Because we would rather face impossible odds than surrender our sovereignty. The matriarch's expression hardened. You are making a grave mistake, Ambassador. We are offering you guidance and protection. We are trying to prevent you from destroying yourselves, as your history suggests you are prone to do. This resolution is for your own benefit. We didn't ask for your protection, Sarah said quietly. We didn't ask for your guidance. We asked only to be treated as equals, and you've answered by trying to make us servants. The matriarch stood taller, her light pulsing with authority. The council gives you 30 standard days to reconsider. Bring this message to your leaders. Tell them that cooperation will result in a smooth transition. Resistance will be met with enforcement measures. The choice is yours, but the outcome is inevitable. This session is concluded. The holographic document pulsed once, then disappeared. Delegates began filing out of the chamber, most ignoring Sarah entirely. A few cast pitying glances in her direction. The Corthian war prime passed close enough to speak. 30 days, human. Use them wisely. Submit, and this can be peaceful. Sarah stood alone in the empty chamber for a long moment. Then she activated her communication device, entering a priority code that would reach Earth faster than any normal transmission. The code was old, established decades ago for exactly this type of emergency. Earth Command. This is Ambassador Chen. Authorization code Alpha 77. Be advised. The Council has declared us subordinate and is demanding submission. She paused, then spoke the phrase that would change everything. I am authorizing Protocol Sleeping Giant. Repeat, Protocol Sleeping Giant is now active. We have 30 days. The response came back within seconds despite the vast distance. A simple confirmation, but Sarah knew what it meant. Across human space, hidden facilities were already coming online. Military production that had been carefully concealed would now operate at full capacity. Defense plans that had been prepared but never revealed would be distributed to every human fleet. The Galaxy Council thought they had seen humanity. They thought they understood what humans were capable of. They had studied Earth civilian shipping, commercial colonies, and public military forces. They had calculated the odds and found humanity wanting. But they had made one critical mistake. They had mistaken humanity's restraint for weakness. They had mistaken peace for inability to wage war. They had looked at 200 years of human spaceflight and assumed they understood 10,000 years of human history. Sarah left the chamber and began the long journey back to human space. Behind her, the council delegates celebrated their victory. Ahead of her, humanity prepared for war. The galaxy was about to learn a lesson that humans had taught each other countless times throughout history. Never threaten a species that has survived by learning how to fight. The Corthian War Council met in their fortress station, a military installation that had defended their home system for 3,000 years. War Prime Dracoth stood before a tactical display showing human space, his confidence absolute. Around him, his senior commanders reviewed deployment orders with the casual efficiency of a military that had not faced a real challenge in centuries. The enforcement fleets are ready, reported his second-in-command. 200 vessels per target world. We begin with their outer colonies, demonstrate overwhelming force, and they will surrender within days. Dracoth nodded approvingly. The humans are emotional creatures. Once they see they cannot win, their survival instinct will override their pride. This is how it always goes with younger species. Across the galaxy, similar conversations were happening in dozens of council chambers. The Vraxians prepared their diplomatic corps to establish oversight governments on human worlds. The Tesarics calculated resource allocations for administering human territories. The Nexari began drafting educational programs to teach humans proper galactic behavior. Everything was proceeding according to plan, but in a small office deep within the Council's intelligence division, an analyst named Zyrtic was having a very different conversation with his computer. Zyrtic was a Vrel, a species known for their analytical minds and obsessive attention to detail. He had been assigned to compile a complete assessment of human capabilities, and what he was discovering kept him awake through multiple sleep cycles. Computer, display human military conflicts for the past 500 years, he commanded. The screen filled with data, wars, battles, skirmishes. The numbers made no sense. Zyrtic's tendrils twitched with confusion. This cannot be correct. Run diagnostics. The computer confirmed the data was accurate. Zyrtic felt a cold sensation spread through his body. According to the records, humans had engaged in major military conflicts during 92% of their recorded history. Not border skirmishes or minor disputes, but full-scale wars that mobilized entire nations. He pulled up specific examples. The First World War had killed 17 million beings in just 4 years. The Second World War, barely 20 years later, had killed over 70 million. And those were fought with primitive chemical weapons and early atomic devices. Computer compared a Korthian military history. The difference was staggering. The Korthians, considered the galaxy's premier warriors, had fought 3 major wars in the past 1,000 years. Humans had fought dozens in just the last century. Zyrtic dug deeper, accessing historical and cultural databases that most analysts ignored. He read about something humans called total war, a concept where entire civilizations mobilized every resource for conflict. He found references to scorched earth tactics, where humans destroyed their own territory rather than let enemies have it. He discovered that humans had created weapons capable of destroying their own planet, used them twice, and then built thousands more. The more he read, the more alarmed he became. There were phrases in human military doctrine that chilled him. Peace through superior firepower. Walk softly and carry a big stick. If you want peace, prepare for war. These were not the philosophies of a primitive species. These were the lessons learned from surviving constant conflict. He found a historical quote from a human admiral from one of their ancient wars. I fear all we have done is to awaken a sleeping giant and fill him with a terrible resolve. The human who said it had been describing his own species after they had been attacked. Zyrtic compiled his findings into a report and requested an emergency meeting with the Council's Strategic Assessment Committee. He was granted 15 minutes, an insultingly short time, but he took it. The committee consisted of 5 senior members representing the Council's most powerful military species. They listened to his presentation with barely concealed impatience. You are suggesting, said the Vraxian representative, that we should be concerned about a species that has been in space for only 2 centuries? I am suggesting, Zyrtic said carefully, that we have fundamentally misunderstood what kind of species we are dealing with. Humans have not been peaceful in space because they are weak. They have been peaceful because they chose to be. There is a difference. The Korthian representative made a dismissive gesture. We have reviewed their military capabilities. Their largest warships are smaller than our cruisers. Their weapons technology is generations behind ours. Their fleet numbers perhaps 3,000 vessels across all their territories. We can field 20,000. That is their registered fleet, Zyrtic insisted. But look at their industrial capacity. They have mining operations throughout their territories that are far more extensive than necessary for their civilian needs. Their shipyards have capabilities that exceed their construction rates. And their manufacturing doctrine emphasizes rapid production over longevity. What are you implying? Asked the Tsaric's representative, light patterns flickering with annoyance. I am implying that they are prepared for war. Not for a war, but for the concept of war itself. It is embedded in their culture, their psychology, their industrial planning. We build ships to last centuries because we live in peace. They build ships to be replaced because they expect conflict. The committee members exchanged glances. The Vraxian spoke again, her tone patronizing. Analyst Zyrtic, your thoroughness is appreciated, but you are seeing patterns that do not exist. Every species has a violent past. The fact that humans have not evolved beyond this is precisely why they need council guidance. Your concerns are noted, but do not change our assessment. Zyrtic left the meeting with a sense of dread. He had done his duty, presented his findings. If they chose to ignore the evidence, there was nothing more he could do. He returned to his office and continued monitoring human communications, hoping desperately that he was wrong. Meanwhile, in human space, something the Council had not anticipated was happening. The order for Protocol Sleeping Giant had reached every human colony, station, and ship. Within hours, the transformation began. Mining stations in the Kuiper Belt, supposedly processing ice and minerals for civilian use, reconfigured their facilities. The mining equipment was real, but it had been designed with dual purposes. Now it began assembling warship components at a rate that would have alarmed Council observers if they had been looking. Civilian transport ships began military retrofits. Cargo haulers became troop carriers. Passenger liners received weapon hardpoints. The human merchant fleet, vast and spread throughout their territory, became a reserve navy. On Earth, factories that produced civilian electronics began producing military computers. Automobile plants switched to tank production. Aerospace manufacturers who built passenger ships began building fighters. The transition was smooth because the plans had existed for decades, updated and refined but never implemented. Human history had taught brutal lessons about unpreparedness. After wars that devastated entire continents, humanity had made a collective decision. Never again would they be caught unable to defend themselves. So they had built their civilization with a hidden capacity for war production, hoping they would never need it. But ready if they did. Admiral Jennifer Hawk stood on the bridge of the UN's Defiant, humanity's newest battleship. It had been officially commissioned only a week ago, but 3 more of its class were already nearing completion. She reviewed deployment orders that placed human fleets in defensive positions around key colonies. "Ma'am," said her tactical officer, "we're picking up increased Council fleet movements. Looks like they're staging near our borders." Hawks nodded. "They're preparing their enforcement action. They think we'll back down when we see their numbers." She smiled without humor. "They're about to learn something about humans." "What's that, ma'am?" "That we don't fight fair. We fight to win." She turned to her communications officer. "Send a message to all fleet commanders. Rules of engagement are authorized as per Protocol Sleeping Giant. If Council forces attempt to enter our territory without permission, they are to be considered hostile. We do not fire first, but if they start this, we end it." Across human space, similar orders were being given. Defensive positions were reinforced. Supply lines were secured. Intelligence assets began active surveillance of Council military movements. And quietly, human diplomats began reaching out to neutral species, those who were not Council members, explaining the situation and requesting that they bear witness to whatever was about to happen. In the Council chambers, delegates continued their preparations with supreme confidence. They had issued their ultimatum. In 22 days, enforcement operations would begin. They expected humanity to surrender long before then. After all, no rational species would fight against such overwhelming odds. But Zyrtec, monitoring human communications that his superiors thought were meaningless civilian chatter, saw things that terrified him. Phrases like, "Remember the Alamo," "Come and take them," "Don't tread on me." Historical references to battles where outnumbered humans had fought to the last rather than surrender. He prepared another report, more urgent this time, but he suspected it would be ignored like the first. The Council had made its decision based on confidence and precedent. They did not understand that they were not facing a normal species. They were facing one that had learned day 29 of the ultimatum arrived with the confidence of inevitability. Warprime Dracoth stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Crimson Fang, surrounded by 199 other Korthian warships. They had just completed their jump into the system containing New Kyoto, a human colony world of approximately 8 million inhabitants. "Status report," Dracoth commanded. "We are in position, Warprime. All ships report ready. We are detecting minimal orbital defenses. The colony appears to be evacuating civilians to underground shelters." Dracoth nodded with satisfaction. The humans were already showing fear. Good. This would be easier than anticipated. "Open a channel to the colony administration." A human face appeared on the screen, a woman in her 50s wearing a simple administrative uniform. Governor Lisa Park looked tired but composed. "This is Governor Park of New Kyoto. You are in violation of our territorial space." "Governor Park," Dracoth said with barely concealed condescension, I am War Prime Dracoth of the Korthian Fleet. I am here to implement Council Resolution 7 Alpha. You will begin immediate preparations to transfer administrative control to Council oversight. Resistance will result in the use of force. Governor Park was silent for a moment. Then she said something that made no sense to Dracoth. War Prime, you should leave, please. For your own sake, leave this system now. Dracoth laughed, a harsh sound that his crew echoed. Governor, I command 200 warships. Your orbital defenses consist of some mining lasers and cargo haulers. Your threats are meaningless. They're not threats, the governor said quietly. They're warnings. You still have time to leave. Dracoth cut the transmission. Begin orbital approach. Prepare to deploy occupation forces. He turned to his tactical officer. How long until their planetary defenses can target us? Sir, their defenses are not targeting us. They're powering down. What? Dracoth looked at the displays. It was true. The human orbital platforms were going dark, their weapons offline. They are surrendering already? Excellent. This will be the fastest enforcement action in Council history. His tactical officer's voice suddenly rose in pitch. Sir, multiple contact warnings. Ships emerging from the far side of the planet. The display lit up with new contacts. 10 ships, 20, 50, 100. The numbers kept climbing. Dracoth felt his confidence waver as the count reached 200, then surpassed it. 300. 350. 400 human warships, sir. The tactical officer reported, his voice shaking. They were hiding in the planet's shadow, using its mass to block our sensors. Dracoth stared at the display. 400 ships. Where had they come from? Intelligence had reported that New Kyoto's defense fleet consisted of perhaps 20 vessels. This was impossible. A new transmission came through. This time it was not the governor, but a human in military uniform. Admiral Sarah Hughes, commander of the 3rd Human Defense Fleet, looked directly at Dracoth with eyes that held no fear. Only cold calculation. War Prime Dracoth, you have entered human sovereign space without authorization and have threatened one of our colonies. You have one opportunity to withdraw your forces peacefully. Refuse and we will defend our territory. Dracoth felt anger override his shock. You dare threaten the Council? You are outnumbered and outclassed. Our weapons technology exceeds yours by generations. Surrender now or be destroyed. Admiral Hughes smiled, but there was no warmth in it. War Prime, you have 200 ships. We have 400. Your ships are designed for prestige and ceremony, because you have not fought a real war in 1,000 years. Our ships are designed to kill and die because we remember what war actually means. Last chance, leave. Dracoth made his decision. All ships battle formation. Target their command ship. Fire when ready. The battle began. The Korthian fleet moved into their traditional formation, a pattern refined over centuries of military theory. It was beautiful, precise, and completely unprepared for what happened next. The human ships did not form neat lines. They scattered like a swarm, moving in patterns that seemed random but were actually carefully coordinated chaos. Korthian weapons targeted where the human ships had been, not where they were. Human ships accelerated and decelerated in ways that should have turned their crews to paste. But somehow they survived. Then the humans opened fire. Missiles launched from human ships were not like Council weapons. Council warfare had evolved into a civilized affair, precise targeting of specific systems to disable rather than destroy. Human missiles carried massive explosive warheads designed for one purpose: complete destruction. They came in waves, hundreds at a time, and Korthian point defenses, designed to stop a few precision weapons, were overwhelmed. The first Korthian ship to die was the Sunrise Blade, a cruiser that had served for 200 years. It simply ceased to exist in a ball of nuclear fire. Then another died, and another. Evasive maneuvers, Dracoth shouted. Return fire. But human ships were not where the targeting systems predicted they would be. They used something the Korthians did not understand: random movement. They zigged and zagged, dove and climbed, making themselves impossible to target effectively. When they did get hit, their armor, though primitive, was thick enough to shrug off hits that would disable more sophisticated Council ships. The humans employed tactics that were considered illegal by Council warfare conventions. They used electronic warfare to jam communications. They launched drones that mimicked ship signatures, drawing fire away from real targets. They transmitted false data that confused Korthian sensors. They even used decoys, empty hulls that exploded when targeted, wasting Korthian weapons. But the most disturbing thing was their aggression. Human ships did not try to disable and capture enemy vessels. They tried to destroy them, completely, utterly. They aimed for reactor cores, weapons magazines, crew compartments. Every shot was designed to kill. Dracoth watched in growing horror as his fleet was torn apart. The Korthians tried to regroup, to form defensive positions, but the humans would not let them. Every time his forces began to organize, human ships would dive through their formation, scattering them again, targeting command ships to break coordination. "Sir, we have lost 70 ships. We need to retreat." "No!" Dracoth roared. "We are Korthians. We do not flee from primitives. All ships focus fire on their command vessel." 20 Korthian ships turned their weapons on Admiral Hughes's ship, the UEN's Indomitable. For a moment it seemed like the concentrated firepower would overwhelm the human vessel. Explosions bloomed across its hull, armor vaporizing under the assault. Then something happened that would be discussed in military academies across the galaxy for centuries to come. 10 human ships deliberately positioned themselves between the Indomitable and the Korthian fire. They took hits meant for their flagship, sacrificing themselves without hesitation. "They are protecting their commander," Dracoth's tactical officer said in disbelief. "They are dying for her." One of the sacrificial ships, already heavily damaged, did not retreat. Instead, it accelerated directly toward a Korthian battleship. The tactical officer realized what was happening a second too late. "They are ramming!" Evasive action. The human ship struck the Korthian vessel at full speed. Both exploded, but the Korthian ship had been a capital ship, one of only 5 in the fleet. The human ship had been a destroyer, already dying. An unfair trade by any military calculus, but the humans had made it anyway. "War Prime, we have lost 40% of the fleet. We must retreat." Dracoth looked at the tactical display. It was a massacre. His beautiful, precise military formation had been shredded by human aggression and tactics that seemed to come from madness itself. The humans fought like they did not care about dying, only about destroying the enemy. "All ships," he said, his voice hollow. "Retreat. Full speed." The Korthian fleet broke and ran. The humans pursued for a time, destroying stragglers, then let them go. When the battle ended, the Korthian enforcement fleet had lost 120 ships. The humans had lost 48. Aboard the Indomitable, Admiral Hughes surveyed the damage reports. 48 ships, nearly 6,000 dead. She felt each loss like a physical weight. But the colony was safe. New Kyoto would remain free. "Ma'am, the Korthians are fleeing the system. Do we pursue?" "No, let them go. Let them carry the message back to the Council." She turned to her communications officer. "Send casualty reports to Fleet Command. And send a message to all human colonies. The Council's enforcement has been met and defeated. But this is only the beginning. Tell everyone to prepare. They are going to come with everything they have." News of the Battle of New Kyoto reached the Council chambers within hours. The reports were met with stunned silence. War Prime Dracoth's testimony was barely coherent, speaking of human ships that moved like living creatures and warriors who welcomed death, if it meant destroying their enemies. The Vraxian matriarch called for an emergency session. "This changes nothing." "The humans got lucky. They surprised an expeditionary force. We will assemble a proper armada and crush them." Zyrtic, sitting in the eye. The Galaxy Council's response to the Battle of New Kyoto was swift and overwhelming. Pride, wounded deeply by an upstart species, demanded satisfaction. Within 2 weeks, the largest military fleet in recorded galactic history began assembling at Rally Point Sigma, a neutral system chosen for its strategic position between Council and human space. 12,000 warships gathered there. Every Council species contributed their finest vessels. The Vraxians brought elegant cruisers that could strike from impossible distances. The Korthians, humiliated and angry, sent their entire active battle fleet. The Tessarics contributed crystal ships that could coordinate perfectly through quantum entanglement. The Nexari sent carriers that could deploy thousands of autonomous fighters. 47 species, united in purpose, assembled an armada that could crack planets. The Council named it the Unification Armada. Its purpose was not just to defeat humanity, but to serve as a permanent lesson to the galaxy. Any species that defied the Council would face overwhelming, irresistible force. Grand Admiral Veshatar, A Vraxian with 5 centuries of military experience took overall command. She stood on the bridge of her flagship and looked at the tactical display with satisfaction. 12,000 ships, against humanity's estimated 3,000 to 4,000 total military vessels. The outcome was mathematically certain. All fleet elements report ready, Grand Admiral, her second-in-command reported. We await your orders to advance into human space. Veshtar prepared to give the order that would end the human rebellion. Then her communications officer spoke, confusion in his voice. Ma'am, we are receiving reports from our border stations. Human fleets are conducting raids on Council territory. Veshtar stared at him. What? That is impossible. They know we have assembled this armada. They should be defending their core systems, not attacking. But the reports kept coming. A human strike force had hit an Nexari logistics depot, destroying 6 months of accumulated supplies. Another human fleet had struck at a Corthian communications relay, crippling coordination for an entire sector. A third had attacked a fuel refinery in Tessaric space, setting back their fleet operations for weeks. The humans were not defending. They were attacking. Ma'am, we are also receiving reports of network intrusions. Human cyber attacks are targeting our communication networks, supply databases, and coordination systems. Veshtar felt the first stirrings of unease. This was not how warfare was supposed to work. When facing a superior force, you defended your most valuable positions and tried to make the cost of attack too high. You did not spread your forces thin, attacking infrastructure, unless you understood something about warfare that the Council had forgotten. Admiral Marcus Chen commanded the 5th Human Strike Fleet, 12 ships conducting what Earth Command called Operation Rolling Thunder. His target was a Vraxian supply convoy carrying weapons and ammunition to the Unification Armada. The convoy was protected by only 30 warships, because the Vraxians had never imagined anyone would be bold enough to attack their supply lines while a massive armada prepared to invade their space. Target lock acquired on the transport vessels. His weapons officer reported, "Fire." Chen ordered simply. Human missiles streaked across space. The Vraxian escorts tried to intercept, but they were positioned to defend against a frontal assault, not a strike from multiple vectors. The transports, massive and slow, were sitting targets. Within minutes, 3 of them exploded, scattering weapons and supplies across space. Vraxian escorts are moving to engage, the tactical officer warned. Let them come. Weapons free, all ships. Hit them hard and fast, then we jump out. The human ships tore into the Vraxian escorts with brutal efficiency. They did not try to disable or capture. They destroyed and moved on. 8 minutes of violence, then the human fleet jumped away, leaving burning wrecks behind. Chen looked at his casualty reports. 1 ship damaged, no losses. The Vraxians had lost 3 vital supply ships and 8 escorts. More importantly, the Unification Armada would have less ammunition when it finally arrived at human space. Set course for Rally Point Beta, Chen ordered. We have 5 more convoys to hit before we head home. This scene played out across a dozen systems. Human strike fleets, small and mobile, hit supply lines, communication nodes, isolated stations, and logistics hubs. They struck without warning, destroyed their targets, and disappeared before reinforcements could arrive. The Council called it cowardice, refusing to face the Unification Armada directly. Humans called it strategy, but the physical attacks were only part of humanity's response. Deep in a bunker on Earth, a different kind of war was being fought. Colonel Sarah Kim commanded what was officially called the Information Warfare Division, though everyone just called it the Cyber Corps. Her team of 300 hackers, programmers, and intelligence specialists had spent the past month mapping Council networks, finding weaknesses, and preparing attacks. Target Package Delta is ready, her chief programmer reported. We have backdoor access to the Corthian Fleet Coordination Network. What can we do with it? Kim asked. Ma'am, we can inject false data into their tactical displays, make their sensors see ships that are not there, or not see ships that are. We can delay their communications by microseconds, enough to disrupt their coordination. We can corrupt their database backup so that when they restore systems, they restore corrupted versions. Kim smiled. Do it, all of it, and make sure you leave traces that point to the Nexari network as the source, ma'am. The Nexari are Council members. Why would they attack the Corthians? They would not. But when the Corthians see evidence that the attack came from Nexari networks, they will start to suspect their allies. Even if they figure out it was us, they will have already started doubting each other. Doubt is a weapon too. The cyber attacks began. Council species found their secure communications were not secure. Fleet coordination became unreliable. Supply orders were lost or duplicated. Targeting data became corrupted. And worst of all, they started suspecting each other. The unity of the Council began to fracture under the pressure of uncertainty and paranoia. Meanwhile, human propaganda teams flooded Council information networks with carefully crafted messages. They released footage of the Battle of New Kyoto, showing Korthian ships being destroyed, making sure to highlight the casualties. They sent messages to civilian populations asking why their governments were starting a war of conquest. They reached out to Council species that had contributed to the Unification Armada reluctantly, encouraging them to reconsider. The Council tried to counter the information warfare, but they were unprepared for it. Their societies had lived in peace for so long that they had no defense against organized psychological operations. Humans had been manipulating information for warfare for centuries. They knew exactly which doubts to plant and which fears to amplify. In the Council chambers, tempers flared as species began accusing each other of incompetence or sabotage. The Korthians demanded to know why Vraxian supply lines were so vulnerable. The Vraxians questioned why Korthian security networks had been compromised. The Nexari found themselves defending against accusations from a dozen species at once. The Vraxian matriarch called for order, but her authority was diminishing. The unified front against humanity was cracking. Grand Admiral Veshitar tried to keep the Unification Armada focused, but problems mounted. Fuel shortages delayed their advance. Communication difficulties disrupted coordination. False intelligence reports sent fleets chasing phantom human forces, and every delay gave humanity more time to prepare. When the Unification Armada finally began its advance toward human core systems, it was 3 weeks behind schedule, operating at 70% of its planned supply capacity. And with morale already damaged by constant harassment, the humans were waiting for them. Earth Command had used the time well. Defensive positions had been fortified. Minefields had been laid across likely approach vectors. Every human ship was positioned exactly where it needed to be. And most importantly, Earth's factories had been running 24 hours a day, producing ships, weapons, and ammunition at rates the Council had not thought possible. Admiral Jennifer Hawks, now commanding Earth's entire defensive fleet, stood on the bridge of her flagship and watched the approaching Council Armada on her tactical display. 12,000 ships, still an overwhelming force despite human efforts to weaken it. Ma'am, all fleets report ready. We have approximately 5,000 ships in defensive positions. Hawks nodded. 5,000 against 12,000. They still outnumber us more than 2 to 1. Her tactical officer smiled grimly. Ma'am, they have numbers. We have home field advantage, superior logistics, and we fight for our survival. Plus, we have one other advantage they do not. What's that? We know how to lose ships and keep fighting. They do not. Hawks allowed herself a small smile. That's the advantage, is it not? We remember that war is not about pretty formations and honor. It is about breaking the enemy's will to fight. She opened a channel to all human fleet commanders. All ships, this is Hawks. The Council Armada is approaching. They expect us to meet them in open space where their numbers give them the advantage. We will not. We fight on our terms at our chosen ground using our rules. Make them pay for every meter of space. Make them question whether their victory is worth the cost. Make them 6 months after the Council's ultimatum. Grand Admiral Vishtar stood in her command center and faced a reality she had never imagined possible. The Unification Armada, the largest military force ever assembled, was losing. The tactical display told the story in cold numbers. Of the 12,000 ships that had begun the campaign, less than 7,000 remained operational. Human losses were also severe, nearly 40% of their fleet destroyed. But the difference was clear in how each side responded to those losses. When the Council lost ships, their logistics networks struggled to replace them. Yards that had not built warships in centuries worked slowly and inefficiently. Species argued over resource allocation. Economies strained under the cost of sustained military production. When humans lost ships, new ones appeared within weeks. Their entire civilization had transformed into a war machine. Every factory, every resource, every citizen was mobilized for the war effort. They produced warships faster than the Council could destroy them. It was impossible, mathematically unsound, and yet it was happening. But numbers were only part of the problem. The real issue was morale. On the Council flagship, Veshitar listened to reports from her commanders and heard despair in their voices. The Korthians, proud warriors who had not known defeat in 1,000 years, were requesting permission to withdraw. The Dasarics, whose perfect coordination had been disrupted by human electronic warfare, were losing cohesion. The Nexari pilots refused to launch after seeing their fighters destroyed in waves by human point defense systems that seemed to predict their every move. Grand Admiral, her second-in-command said quietly, "We are receiving reports of civilian unrest on Council worlds. Populations are demanding to know why we are fighting this war. Human propaganda broadcasts are reaching our home systems despite our best efforts to block them." Veshitar closed her eyes. The humans had found the Council's greatest weakness. They were not united by necessity but by choice. And choice could be withdrawn. The breaking point came at the Battle of Proxima Station. It was meant to be the Council's decisive victory, a massive assault on humanity's second-largest shipyard. Veshitar personally led 4,000 ships in what should have been an overwhelming attack. The humans met them with 2,000 ships and a level of ferocity that shocked even veteran commanders. Human vessels fought in ways that violated every principle of civilized warfare. They rammed damaged ships into Council formations. They set ambushes using mined asteroids. They used civilian transports as decoys, drawing fire away from military vessels. They broadcast false surrender signals, then attacked when Council ships moved in to accept the surrender. The tactics were considered war crimes by Council standards. They were also devastatingly effective. After 16 hours of continuous battle, Veshitar ordered a withdrawal. The Council had lost 900 ships. The humans had lost 600, but Proxima Station still stood, still produced warships, and was already being repaired. That night, Veshitar received a message from the Council chambers. 3 species had voted to withdraw from the Unification Armada. They cited economic concerns, but everyone knew the truth. They had lost the will to continue. Within a week, 7 more species withdrew their forces. The Unification Armada was disintegrating. On Earth, Admiral Hawks received the intelligence reports with cautious hope. The Council was fracturing, but they were still dangerous. Wounded predators often fought most desperately. "Ma'am, we are receiving a transmission from the Council flagship. Grand Admiral Veshitar requests to speak with you directly." Hawks felt her heart rate increase. This was either a final ultimatum or something she had barely let herself hope for. "Put her through." The Vraxian Grand Admiral appeared on the screen. She looked tired, her luminescent form dimmer than before. For a long moment, the 2 commanders simply looked at each other. Enemies who had never met, but had been trying to kill each other for 6 months. "Admiral Hawks," Veshitar said, her voice carrying none of its earlier arrogance, "I request a ceasefire to discuss terms." Hawks kept her expression neutral. "The only terms humanity will accept are the same we offered at the beginning. Recognition of our sovereignty and complete withdrawal from our territory." "I understand. The Council is prepared to discuss these terms." "And the subordination resolution?" Veshitar was silent for a moment. "It will be rescinded, completely. Humanity will be recognized as a sovereign species with full rights and protections under galactic law." Hawks allowed herself a small smile. "Then we have something to discuss. But Grand Admiral, understand this clearly. We will not negotiate while under threat. Your fleets will withdraw from our territory before talks begin. We will verify the withdrawal, and only then will we send representatives." "That is acceptable." Veshitar paused. "Admiral Hawks, may I ask a question off the record?" "You may ask. Would you really have kept fighting? Even if we had destroyed every human ship, would you have continued from your planets? From your stations? Would you have fought until the last human was dead?" Hawks did not hesitate. "Yes, we would have. Because we have learned through bitter history that some things are worth more than survival. Freedom is one of them. We would rather die free than live as subordinates." Veshitar closed her eyes. "I believe you. That is why we are having this conversation. You cannot defeat a species that prefers death to submission." 3 weeks later, Ambassador Sarah Chen returned to the Galaxy Council chambers. This time she was not alone. A full human delegation accompanied her, including military advisors, economic specialists, and diplomatic staff. And this time they were not standing in the center of the floor like supplicants. They were seated at the council table as equals. The Vraxian matriarch, who had declared humanity subordinate 6 months earlier, now stood to formally welcome them. Her voice carried none of its earlier condescension. The Galaxy Council recognizes the species known as humanity as a sovereign civilization with all rights and privileges accorded to Council members. Resolution 7 Alpha is hereby declared void and rescinded. The Council extends its formal apologies for the conflict and proposes the following terms for peace. The terms were everything humanity had demanded. Recognition of all human territorial claims. Reparations for war damages to be paid by the Council. Withdrawal of all Council military forces from human space. And most importantly, humanity would be offered full membership on the Council with voting rights equal to any other species. Sarah Chen listened to the terms, then stood to address the Council. On behalf of humanity, we accept these terms with the following additions. There will be an independent investigation into the events that led to this conflict. The findings will be made public to all galactic civilizations, and the Council will implement reforms to prevent this from happening again to any other species. There were murmurs around the chamber, but no one objected. The Council had learned its lesson. After the formal session ended, the Vraxian matriarch approached Sarah privately. Ambassador Chen, may I speak candidly? Of course, we made a grave error. We saw your species as young and assumed you were weak. We saw your restraint and mistook it for inability. What would you have done if you had won decisively? If you had the power to subjugate the Council as we tried to subjugate you? Sarah considered the question carefully. Matriarch, humanity has been the conquered and the conqueror throughout our history. We have learned that domination breeds only resentment and eventual rebellion. If we had won decisively, we would have offered you the same thing we are accepting now. Peace between equals. Because we understand something that the Council forgot during its long centuries of peace. What is that? That true strength is not the ability to dominate others. It is the wisdom to choose not to, even when you could. We fought this war not to conquer, but to remain free. Now that we have that freedom, we have no desire to take yours. The matriarch was silent for a long moment. Your species is younger than mine by millennia, Ambassador. Yet in this moment I feel like the child being educated by the adult. Sarah smiled. Then perhaps we can learn from each other. That is what equals do. 6 months after the peace treaty was signed, Analyst Jertik was promoted to head of strategic assessment for the entire Council. His first action was to establish a new department dedicated to understanding species psychology and cultural military doctrine before making any assumptions about their capabilities. His second action was to commission a comprehensive study of human history, culture, and philosophy. The resulting document became required reading for all Council diplomats and military officers. It was titled simply, Understanding Humanity, a Species Forged by Adversity. The introduction contained a warning that would be repeated in Council chambers for generations.